If you go down to the woods today, you'll have a brilliant time because they're full of ghosts, witches, fairies like me, and all sorts of cool stuff. Over a quarter of a century ago, historian and arborist Thomas Pakenham published this book, Meetings with Remarkable Trees, and it totally changed the way I looked at them.
This is not a conventional book about trees. It will not help you identify them, let alone cultivate them. It's a personal selection of 60 remarkable individuals or groups of trees, mostly very large and mainly very ancient, and all with a strong personality.
Remarkable individuals like this one here behind me, known as Cromwell's tree, standing here alone in this field in Scotland, where his troops camped during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. On my wanderings, I've met many such remarkable trees, photographed them, taken bits of video. I've even hugged a couple of them. So this is a kind of cobbled together journey around Scotland in search of some of the more mysterious ones. On the banks of the River Tay in Perthshire grow survivors of a once great forest. This fine sycamore is over 300 years old, but its neighbour is the tree we've come to visit, and it's believed to be at least twice that age. The Birnam oak, a quintessential example of a remarkable, or to give it a more proper name, a heritage tree. I mean, look, it even gets its own interpretation panel. A living legend. Well, at this point I think it's only fair to reveal the original name for this talk. In 2015, Storm Desmond nearly washed it away, with its lower branches propped up with wooden crutches. It's even had to endure an idiot lighting a fire in its hollow trunk. Somehow this medieval relic survives and just keeps growing. Birnam Wood features in a prophecy channelled by the witches of Shakespeare's Macbeth.
Round about the cauldron go, in the poisoned entrails through, toad that under cold stone days and nights has 31 sweltered venom sleeping got. Boil thou first in the charmed pot, double, double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Could the old oak have been alive at the time of Macbeth in the 11th century? Nah, not really. But it would have been a handsome, well-grown tree in 1599, which is when Shakespeare is said to have visited Birnam as one of a troupe of travelling entertainers sent to Scotland by Elizabeth I at the request of King James VI. In the play, the Weird Sisters summon an apparition who appears as a child bearing a crown and holding a tree in its hand, who tells Macbeth,
Macbeth shall never vanquished be, until great Birnam Wood to high Doon Hill shall come against him.
Macbeth laughs. That will never be. Believing this means he will live out a full and victorious life. I will not be afraid of death and bane till Birnam Forest come to Dunsinane. However, the prediction comes true in the play when his enemy, Malcolm's forces, use branches from the wood to camouflage themselves as they advance to attack Macbeth at Dunsinane Hill. And Macbeth comes to a sticky end, decapitated by Macduff. And what of the three witches? At a crossroads, just to the east of Forres, stands the Pictish Swernose Stone. According to local law, this is the place where Macbeth consorted with the witches. In the legend, the witches were imprisoned inside the stone, and should the stone ever fall, they will be free to seek their revenge. Thankfully, the shadowy deep state organisation, who were entrusted to protect us from such things, Historic Environment Scotland, have secured their prison by entombing it in this high-tech reinforced glass. So we are safe for now. Well, if you're anything like me, you'll often find yourself entering such words as witch and tree and Scotland into Google. And you might well end up on the website of Paul Bennett, the Northern Antiquarian, and a superb compendium of knowledge it is too. Similarly, the National Library of Scotland online map collection is an invaluable resource when it comes to antiquities and anomalies in the landscape. At the end of the 19th century, the Ordnance Survey included a curious landmark on their map of Aberuthven Wood, Witch Tree. It's not a tree we know a lot about, and it doesn't appear on the current maps. Perhaps it's long gone. However, the Northern Antiquarian has visited the wood and has claimed to have found it. So let's follow in his footsteps and see what we can find. This is the place, and it certainly matches the location on the old map. It obviously came down many years ago, which might explain its absence from modern maps. It's bigger and older than anything else here. At some point in its life, it's been impaled with many iron spikes, hoops and pegs, which are still here. The woodland shows signs of commercial activity, with felling, planting, and a nearby forester's house. Perhaps the old tree was too gnarly for good timber. Such trees were called granny pines by forestry workers. Or could it have been used to secure a skyline logging cableway to lower timber down the hillside? Perhaps this activity brought down the old witch tree, or was it blown over in a storm after the trees sheltering it were cleared? There's evidence someone tried to split the fallen tree with iron levers, a task that may have been hastily abandoned as the tools are still in place. And why witch tree? I'd certainly describe it as having what they say, a threatening aura. Could the old tree be associated with Kate McNiven, the legendary witch of Mondsey? The local landowners in nearby Aberuthven house had in their possession what they believed to be a magic ring given by the witch. It is said she could change shape into the form of a bee, a talent that cost her life. The story goes she cursed the people of Mondsey as they lit her execution fires. The Laird of Inchbrake tried to stop the tragedy, and she rewarded him with the ring. And Kate McNiven's curse on the Laird and lands of Mondsey? Writing around 1903, Miss Louisa Graham of Inchbrake states, Mondsey has never since been owned from father to son. Mondsey Kirkton still stands, but has grown smaller, and always an idiot dwells in the village. We're also close to the village of Dunning, and the mysterious Maggie Wall Memorial. Maggie Wall burnt here 1657 as a witch, or was she? There's no mention of her in the University of Edinburgh's Survey of Scottish Witchcraft database. If you're not familiar with this grim but indispensable resource, the interactive witchcraft map is well worth exploring. Could it be the trial and execution of Maggie was never recorded? Tragically, according to the archives, a witch hunt did take place here in May 1662. Here, the following women were arrested for witchcraft and sentenced to death: Jonette Toys, Isabel McKendley, Elspeth Reed, Jonah Earth, Margaret Cross, Helen Ilson, Jonette Martin, Jonette Young. So is the monument to them, the inscription being inaccurately transcribed over the years, and should read, Many were burnt here, 1662, as a witch. Or was it, as Jeff Hodder believes, the name of a place rather than a person? So the tree and its intriguing inclusion on the old maps remains a mystery. And perhaps all the better for it. What is certain is the dragon's skull, impaled by iron weapons, is a fine contender for Simulacra Corner. Marked on this 1867 Perthshire Ordnance Survey map, there's another curious feature, the Bogle Bush. In addition to measuring the physical landscape, the Ordnance Survey also marked the position of local cultural and historical features. Thankfully, this time we have the surveyor's field notes to help us interpret it. These OS name books, as they are called, were compiled using interviews with local people, preferably authority types. So here we have the name of the landmark, the Bogle Bush, possible variations on spelling. They were particularly keen to agree on the correct spelling of a place. Up until then, you could pretty much write place names however you liked. The names of those who verified the spelling, so we have Mr. Robert Miller, Mr. James Stewart, and Mr. Fraser. And a description.
This name is applied to a birch tree situated on the north side of the road leading from Socha to Kinrossie. Mr. Miller says that there is a superstitious tradition existing in the locality that bogles have been seen at this tree.
It has to be said this isn't actually a birch tree, it's a sycamore. But certainly it looks like a place where such creatures might reside. What's a bogle? Like its regional counterpart, the boggard, it's a kind of generic term for a supernatural being. Anything from a ghost to a scarecrow, a brownie, to a huge beast. We'll pay it a visit. And typically, it's getting dark. But as Robert Louis Stevenson once said, there's a romance about all those who are abroad in the black hours. they're hiding in here. Bogles are not necessarily evil. Most accounts describe them as being a bit mischievous or annoying. But it's said that if anything happens to the tree, a great calamity will befall Kinrossie. At the end of the 19th century, the trunk started collapsing. To prevent this, a band was forged and fitted by Kinrossie blacksmith and Kirk elder David Gray. In 2000, a local councillor raised concerns to ensure its precarious roadside position doesn't allow it to be condemned. So if you found yourself driving along the lonely stretch of road between Socker and Kinrossie, please drive with care. We wouldn't want any harm to befall you, the Bogles, or the village. Up to Aberfoyle in the Trossachs and the mysterious case of the Reverend Robert Kirk. Kirk was born in the manse at Aberfoyle in 1644, where he became minister and a scholar, occupying himself with such pursuits as translating the Bible into Gaelic. He was also a bit of a Fortean. Throughout his adult life, Kirk took copious notes on the various beliefs of his practitioners regarding fairies, the phenomenon of second sight, doppelgangers, and similar matters. In 1691, he condensed these into the wonderfully titled The Secret Commonwealth, an essay on the nature and actions of the subterranean, and for the most part invisible people, heretofore going under the name of elves, fauns, and fairies. To Kirk, such phenomena sat relatively comfortably with Christian belief, and he hoped may help prove the existence of Christian entities such as angels in a backlash to an increasingly agnostic world. Kirk's manuscript was handed to his eldest son, but was lost until 1815, when it was rediscovered by none other than Sir Walter Scott. The original remains in the library of Edinburgh University, and the book is still in print today. Now we come to the strange death of the minister. There's a hill next to the village, which has a reputation as being a fairy hill. We know that he walked there daily. Some say it had become an obsession, coming back night after night, lying down with his ears to the ground, listening for noises emanating from the fairy realm. It is said that he normally only left when his wife came to get him, anxious as she was over his nightly escapades. Then one night, after yet again failing to return, his lifeless body was discovered on the hill and returned to the village. He was buried in the old churchyard at Aberfoyle, but many of his congregation believed the coffin contained a changeling, or merely weighed down with stones. They believed his spirit was taken into the fairy hill and resigned in a lone pine on the summit. Whether he's buried in the churchyard, trapped inside the pine for revealing the secret commonwealth, or parting with the fairies inside the caverns and halls beneath Doon Hill, we'll never know. But what's clear is the pine has become a wishing tree. This wish to the fairies, for example: for my husband's money dreams to come true. I'm not going to pass comment on the practice of leaving stuff on trees. It's a contentious subject and one I intend to dodge as best I can. Personally, I'm a take only photos, leave only footprints sort of guy. I'm largely unjudgmental about people, unless they're in authority, and in particular in government, in which case I'll happily sling mud at them all day long. With all these old wishing tree and well sites, it's considered bad luck to remove anything. Not only might it stop the wish working for the person who left it, it might also transfer any problem or illness they were wishing rid of to you. At the somewhat debatable geographic heart of Scotland grows its oldest living inhabitant, the Fortingall Yew. No one's quite sure how old it is. There are some guesses at between 5,000 and 10,000 years. More rational and likely estimates are that it's 2,000 to 3,000 years old, which is still pretty staggering. Yews don't really age like other trees. Bits die off, usually the central core. But new growth can sprout from just about anywhere, which is why it's near impossible to accurately date these ancient trees. This cycle of death and rebirth has been revered by pagans and Christians alike. Here in Fortingall, it was traditional for the funeral procession to pass through the tree on their way to burial. A portal to the afterlife, as we could see in this 19th century engraving. In the 18th century, the antiquarian Thomas Pennant visited the tree and reported,
"In Fortingall churchyard are the remains of a prodigious yew tree, whose ruins measured 56.5 feet in circumference."
Strangely, for such a central location, this area of Scotland is quite remote. There are no railways, A roads, and few through routes. The old ways seem to have endured longer here than in other areas. Thomas Pennant also noticed that the tree had been damaged by bonfires lit to celebrate the pagan festival of Beltane.
Perhaps it's just as well that you won't be here tomorrow to be offended by the sight of our May Day celebrations here.
Similarly, the local community would gather together in the neighbouring field by Bronze Age burial mound to celebrate the Celtic festival of Samhain. They would build a bonfire on it, link hands, and dance around the mound. To all accounts, this celebration was still going on well into the 20th century. Known as the Cairn of the Dead, it also seems to have been reused in the 14th century as a place away from the churchyard to bury victims of the plague. This area is rich with stories about the Cailleach, the divine old witch, and of Celtic saints ridding the land of plague. According to legend, the corpses were brought here on a sledge drawn by a white horse, led by an old woman. The Celts believed a white horse had the ability to travel between their other world and ours. Could it have been the Cailleach herself who brought her followers here to be buried? Or was it just the local hotel owner looking to cash in on some dark tourism? As the fame of the tree spread, tourists came, and some of them started taking cuttings as charms. Parts of the tree were even turned into souvenir quakes. So, sadly, for its own protection, the old yew was walled up. If you visit the tree today, you can be forgiven for being somewhat underwhelmed. It's a shadow of its former self. But as a true ancient, it absolutely deserves our awe and respect. When some excavation work was being carried out last century, they unearthed this ancient cut-marked rock by the tree. And in more recent times, botanists were surprised to discover that one small branch in the outer part of the tree has switched sex and is now bearing female berries. So, the old tree still has some secrets to tell. This sycamore is thought to have self-seeded in a blacksmith's scrap heap. A campaign to protect the tree was launched in 2007 by local author John Barrington, who said the tree was one of the great wonders and a freak of nature, and it now has protected status. He said, the seedling grew up through this pile of scrap metal, on which the local blacksmith had thrown all kinds of things. As it grew, it swallowed up and took with it hundreds of bits and pieces of metal. As it became stronger, the blacksmith would prop up or hang various articles such as the anchor or a heavy chain, which he would leave and forget about. Gradually the tree absorbed them too. If you look closely, you'll see various nuts and bolts and even a bridle in there. It's believed the bicycle once belonged to a villager, conscripted during World War I, who left it hanging on a branch. Maybe he never came back. Or perhaps on his return, he found the tree had claimed the bicycle as its own. But I have my doubts about that story, as I'm sure I've heard it somewhere before. The tree has long outlived the blacksmith, Hugh MacGregor, who died in 923, aged 82. And according to experts, the tree's iron diet has done it little harm at all. On this 1858 map of Renfrewshire, you'll find the intriguingly named Kissing Tree on the summit of Fereneze Braes. According to the legend, if a young man could drive a nail into the tree with a single blow, he would earn a kiss from his sweetheart. On the way up, we have a fine example of a Neolithic cup and ring marked stone. Or is it? Word on the street is a local man carved this bit of rock art with power tools in the last 10 years. But look above it, and you'll see the legendary lone tree. In Rambles Around Glasgow, published in 1854, Hugh MacDonald writes,
Leaving the glen at its upper extremity, We now proceed along the summit of the Fereneze Braes in a northerly direction and speedily arrive at an old thorn well known as the kissing tree. The stem and branches of this sturdy old bush or tree are thickly studded with nails which have been driven in from time to time by youthful lovers who are in the habit of visiting the spot. From the roughness of the wood, it is no easy matter to send a nail home into it, and the swain who manages to accomplish the feat in presence of his sweetheart is held fully entitled to a fond kiss on the spot.
The observant of you might have noticed it's not a thorn. The original tree fell shortly after Hugh MacDonald's visit. This beech is now the tree that has inherited its name and position. In Celtic times, the hawthorn, or May tree, was a symbol of fertility, youth and sexuality. It is thought that most marriages took place at this time of year, usually at Beltane. Hawthorn would have been in full bloom, bringing abundant blessings to the newlyweds. There's no sign of the tradition persisting into the 21st century. Although strangely, we did find evidence of local youths demonstrating their prowess at driving a different sort of metal object into the bark. The side of the tree is peppered with air gun pellets. Train. Plane now.